All right, so this is for Stefano Sezzi, and basically he just wants a full critique. So the first thing that I would say right off the bat is that you kind of have an issue with the posing, and what I mean by that is that um, looking at the way the pose is, you are kind of leaning on the figure first, and then on top of that you've got the knee bent, but yet it's still pretty close to the same spot. So what you need to do is realize that by lifting up this knee and being on the tippy toe, you're not really giving that character the stance that you're looking for because it's turning it off balance, especially with the lean. You basically want to do a contrapposto um, type of pose, and what I mean by that is, simply put, um, there we go. Yeah. Okay, so simply put, if you're leaning in one direction, you need to balance out. So an example is if you're bending your hip like this, then what you're doing is you're putting your knee like so, which is fine. But then what you need to do is balance this pelvis out. So it would be something like this, and that's where your point of reference as far as that goes is a little bit awkward, and that's kind of where you need to look at things. Um, so you need to have that sense of uh, where things are going as far as how the hip is bent, and then the counterbalance of the shoulders, and that's something that you don't have here, that you need to kind of work with. Now the second thing is the anatomy. You have a really thin neck, you have kind of an awkward face, things like that need to be kind of adjusted. I think you did a good job on like the arm, and kind of worked towards the hands a little bit, but then there's changes that I would make, especially in the hips, as well as kind of the neck area. You have to realize that the neck tends to go forward, not backwards, or not straight up and down. So having a forward neck, bringing her head forward and maybe even a little bit larger, would kind of settle that out. You've got the anime style eyes. I generally tell people to stay away from anime because if you're trying to get better at art, it's a cop out. So the things that you want to do are, I would narrow the shoulders a little bit and widen the hips a little bit, and that's going to give her a more feminine feel, um, that type of thing. And then, be aware of the shape of the leg. Right now, your shape of your leg, from a front view pretty much is a straight up and down kind of view. Whereas if you take this straight up and down process here and kind of bend it, you're going to get a bend here. It's going to come down, and then you're going to kind of build out, where you're going with this. So, it comes out like this, kind of comes in, and it curves a little bit. So it's little things like that's going to sell the anatomy a little bit more, especially if you put a kneecap in there, and then you put your bone structure in there, muscle structure, that type of thing, and then there tends to be this kind of where you want to get this angry face. If you think of both legs, you want it that angry face, like this, and that's going to give you the angles of the ankles, and the calf muscle is going to give you an angle too. So those are things that you really want to put towards. Also, your structure and anatomy and the ribs, things like that. You just pay more attention to anatomy. Do anatomy structures. Um, and then the other thing that I would tell you is, what you want to do is you want to really take a look at the structure of, how you're kind of building this up. If you look at your tonal values here, you've got bright white on the outside, you've got this red tone on the middle, and then it goes black, almost using a dark black here, especially in the shadows. You know, it's that dark red color. But then over here, you're building up purples and pinks. And so the problem with that is you're not really blending that area. And then in the middle, you've got the highlight white and then a real light gray. And so you need to understand that the value of things, and the way lighting reacts to value. I would pick up like a James Gurney color and light book and really take a look at how he talks about his colors and tones and things like that. You know, so I would definitely take care of things like that, and that's going to kind of help you out as well. And also pay attention to form. You know, like here, it's going to be bigger and thicker, so that you want to really sell this form. And then is the material this shiny that it's pulling a matte figure, or is it, you know, so things like this, you know, getting the dark undertones of, you know, the way the shadows would fall on this side, um, you know, things like that are going to really kind of help push that aspect as well. Um, Especially work on your facial anatomy. You know, something like this here. Like if I'm going to round this out and I'm going to push this one out here, maybe even. Do you see how that curve makes a lot more difference? And that's going to really what's really going to sell your features here. And then, you know, you're doing a floor that's reflective, but you're putting shadows over it. So kind of watch that aspect and look at actually how glass and stuff reflects when you're standing on it. And then this here is where you build in your muscles. You know, I can put in a little bit of a muscle structure. You know, I can build out things like this. And by not doing this smooth tone, you start giving form to everything, and it builds up things a lot more interest. And then realize that the form of things, like if you have light stuff in shadows, it's going to be darker. It can be also all darker than black, basically, if it's done right. So you know, like this, you can see how I'm just kind of you know, putting things in there. And so, you know, really check out your lighting. I would almost go darker, especially in, you know, this area here where it's being hidden by the actual leg. So this turns up dark, and then that becomes a little bit more definition and interest, and it matches the value point that you're kind of looking for. So those are things that you really want to pay attention to. And then, you know, again, it depends on how um, you know, how your shadow would look. I mean, if the lighting is coming from here, you'd also have a shadow here. You know, things like this. It really would push how your shadow is developing over this, and especially you'd see some of the muscle structure, the ribs, things like that, and that's going to build in. You know, and I would cover a lot of this up here, things like that. So you need to look at form, look at that type of thing, when you're building this stuff up. You're trying to do everything so smooth and so pristine, but there's forms within the forms. You know, and this is why, you know, even though like the arm here is a basic tube. Like if I would draw this, this is a basic everyday cylinder like this, yes. But you have to realize on top of that cylinder there would be um, other layers. Like you'd have the muscle on top of this here that's basically forming this. There might be a ball here for the bicep, and you know this would come down, um, and there would be a hard joint here on the elbow. So all things like that, there's hard and soft forms on this that you're basically creating microforms on top of your major forms. And so be aware of that. Whereas what you're doing now is you're not really building up the forms. All you've done is basically created tubes with that unified shading. And that's not really what shading is about. It's about getting the form, using the light and the shadows to create form in the body to define the shape of the body. So those are things that you want to pay attention to. And I would really work on faces. It's very flat. It doesn't, it doesn't feel like you could even cover this up and then go in with some of your dark colors here and start, building out some of these lights and values here, and putting in shapes in that format. So those are things that I would work on. I mean, I think composition wise, there's really no compositions. It's a lone standing figure. The figure's not really doing anything but looking, drinking a juice box or something. The lighting is a dual tone lighting, which is okay, but you really didn't use the lighting to master the form. Um, and the anatomy needs work. You need to reference human bodies. You know, get get models, get whoever you can, take pictures, that type of thing, of people so that you understand what's going on. And especially with a sci-fi thing like this, look at cosplay, look at things like that, and that'll help you out. All right, I hope that helps.